Steph Curry injured his left shoulder on this play earlier tonight, and in this video we're going to take a closer look at what exactly might have happened to the Warriors star player. Welcome back everybody, I'm Dr. Brian Sutterer, and on this channel I try to teach you about the underlying anatomy and mechanisms of various sports injuries, so if that kind of thing interests you, please consider subscribing to support the channel and let me know down below what you learned. This was the play tonight in the Pacers game where Curry injured his left shoulder, and I'll tell you, on at least my initial review of this, nothing seems overly catastrophic or significantly major in terms of big, obvious, clear, surgical, season-ending types of things. But I think looking at what we see here, knowing a little bit about Curry's injury past, I think gives some clues about what I'd be most concerned about. Obviously here, Curry is reaching in for this ball, and there's really nothing about this position in and of itself that's awkward. But what you have to remember is anytime your arm is outstretched away from your body, it's going to force your rotator cuff muscles to help do a little bit more work to stabilize the shoulder. People who do repetitive outstretched activities are more prone to rotator cuff injuries with those muscles around the shoulder. So anytime an athlete has their arms sort of outstretched like this and is trying to provide a significant amount of force, one thing I always think about is potential strain to the rotator cuff muscles, or how the rotator cuff muscles might be trying to overwork, and if they don't work as well, could potentially lead to some instability in the shoulder joint. So in this position, as Curry reaches out, at first there's nothing abnormal, but because he's trying to bring his arm down, the Pacers player is trying to bring the ball up, there's this counteracting of forces here, and so it puts a lot of strain on Curry's left shoulder and kind of his upper back. I don't clearly see his shoulder pop out of place or dislocate. There's no clear like muscle tendons or anything that we see snap, but right away, of course, Curry is holding onto that left shoulder in a decent amount of pain. And then we see him running down the court with his arm kind of hanging at his side a little bit, grabbing up maybe on the kind of lateral or posterior portion of that left shoulder. Quick throwback, this is actually reminiscent of something that happened with Curry about a year ago, where he had this sort of awkward bump and injured his left shoulder, but actually didn't miss any time. We can see here he's on the bench kind of grabbing in that same spot of his left shoulder. And the play where this happened was just some innocuous little bump. We can see him chasing Bogdanovich around a screen here, and basically just a little bit of abnormal contact to that left shoulder with his arm kind of pushing out was enough to sort of irritate the shoulder. Curry finished with 50 points in this game and didn't miss any time, but the way he sort of grabbed up at his left shoulder was, to me, reminiscent of what we saw tonight. Everything taken together, my top concerns for Curry would be a little subluxation of his shoulder joint, not a true dislocation, but some subtle shifting in the shoulder joint, or potentially a strain of one of the shoulder muscles. When this happened last year with Curry, such a subtle little movement, everything acting like some shoulder joint pain, it made me wonder if he has some underlying instability in his left shoulder to make him more prone to these little bumps that can cause that ball and socket to shift. Whenever your arm is outstretched and away from your body, that puts more pressure on the shoulder joint to make it want to slip forward a little bit relative to the socket. So here, when Curry has that left arm extended outward and then is having the Pacers player sort of rip his arm back out and behind him, what that's going to do is it's going to cause this force to be directed with the head of the shoulder joint moving anterior. So if there's any underlying instability in this shoulder joint, this is a position that might cause a little bit more of a shift that could irritate the shoulder joint, potentially irritate the labrum. On this view from behind, we can actually see really clear outlines of all the different muscles in his shoulder. So of course, right down here in the arm, we're going to have the triceps. This contour is going to be more the posterior head of the deltoid. And then what I believe we're seeing come right up here is going to be the latissimus dorsi muscle that actually goes down to the lower portion of the back. And then deep under here, we're going to have a couple of the rotator cuff muscles called the infraspinatus and the teres minor that are working to externally rotate the shoulder. So in this position, those muscles and tendons are going to be elongated as his arm is outstretched from his body. But then they're also trying to fire and contract to stabilize his arm when it's in that outstretched position, making them more prone to a strain. With our triple box here, we can kind of compare the anatomy model to what we see with Curry. So of course, this is going to be the posterior portion of the deltoid that we can see outlined right about there. We're of course going to have the triceps down here, the latissimus dorsi muscle wrapping up sort of in this position, kind of coming from the back right up through there to attach on the upper part of the arm. And then deep to all that, we're going to have those rotator cuff muscles. Overall, I'd be surprised if this is a significant long-term absence sort of thing for Curry. Of course, video doesn't tell us everything. Their initial physical exam is of course going to point to not only which structure in the shoulder could be involved, but to what extent. Beyond just the labrum within the joint of the shoulder and the rotator cuff muscles, there's the biceps tendon, there's there's the AC joint, there's other structures around the shoulder, but again, I think I'd be most likely concerned about a little bit of irritation to his labrum or shoulder joint from some slight subluxation or shift versus just a shoulder strain, potentially an injury to one of the rotator cuff muscles or tendons or the lat muscle because of how his arm was in that outstretched position trying to stabilize while he was applying a force. That's it for the video. Let me know as always down below any questions or comments and just what you learned if it's something new. Thank you as always for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.